I'm Alan Dale with Gale Force Winds, and I got to tell you, this is a very exciting day here at Central Minex 2024. Great conversation going on, and thanks to our good friends at Calibur for bringing this conversation alive. The real thought leaders in the room here, understanding that everybody's voices matter in this conversation. Peter, I'm led to believe that you're an important guy in the room. We need to be talking to you. You've got a lot of knowledge. Why don't you introduce yourself and tell us what you do?
Well, my name's Peter Dimmell. I'm a geologist. I've been in the mineral exploration industry for 55 years. And it surprises people because I don't look that old, you know. I always get a lot of laughs when I say that, so it sort of bothers me, but it is what it is.
Yeah.
Yes, I've been in mineral exploration. I've worked primarily in Newfoundland over the years, but I've worked in New Brunswick, Nova Scotia. I've worked in South America or South Africa. I've worked in Mexico a reasonable number of times. So I've been pretty well. I've been in Ontario, been around Canada in different areas. So mostly with major companies, but since about 1992 as a mineral exploration consultant, working mostly with junior companies. So right now I'm a director of 3 public companies. I'm also working a little bit with Newfoundland Gold because of our connection there with Kevin and Al and myself, optioning the property to them originally, the property just outside Gander here. And I have my own properties too, and I work with Prospectors a lot. So
wow.
Sort of says what I do.
Peter, 55 years, you must have seen the sector evolve over time. Tell me about what you're seeing now in the moment. What's it look like for this part of Newfoundland?
Well, it's interesting. I worked for Noranda Exploration. I moved to Newfoundland in 1969 when I got out of university. And I was here till 1982. We were primarily looking for copper. Noranda was known as a copper company, but we looked for what they call volcanogenic massive sulfide deposit, VMS deposits. And this area, central Newfoundland, is very good, especially the Bay Verte area, Buckens area. Obviously, still people spending a lot of money and a lot of time looking for those type of deposits. So we were working out of Gander. We used to drive every week. Mondays we'd leave and we'd go west. Fridays we'd come back east to Gander and we'd go across the Appleton Fault Zone. I think we knew there was a fault zone there, but we certainly didn't know there was any gold there. Now, we weren't a gold company at the time. Back in '82, around the time I was leaving to move with Noranda to Bathurst, New Brunswick, and I was in Bathurst till '89 when I moved back to St. John's with another company. But just the last time, Wayne Reed, who was another geologist with Noranda, and myself proposed a budget based on work that had been done by Frank Blackwood, who was a government geologist who had been mapping in this area. They had found a gold showing. Didn't know, I don't think he knew it was gold at the time, but he suspected there was gold in it. It was a quartz vein with arsenopyrite, and he mentioned that. And another company went in, assayed the rock, and staked it, a company called Westfield Resources. Based on that, we said, you know, we've never really looked at gold in this area. So we proposed a program of till sampling using a punjar drill, drill down through the rock, which took samples, and that was done every few hundred meters. And that was done a couple of years later, and that showed a lot of gold in the area. So what happened then? Noranda, because they had guys like Al Keats, Fred Keats, Calvin Keats, the Keats family, they got tasked with following up these things, and they started finding gold chunks. So they found them right up to Gander Bay, essentially, Deuter Lake. You see all the ones, if you're listening to the talks that are going on here today, you're hearing the same showings being mentioned, right? Plus a pile more. And that really started it. But what we got lucky with was 1998, the ground to the north of the Trans-Canada Highway, where Newfound has most of their showings, that came open. And it was based on Noranda work. I got a call from Al Keats, Al and Kevin, like I say, were partners on it, to stake some claims to the north of the highway. There was gold. We knew there was gold in the Knob and a few of these other showings south of the highway, but nobody really looked up there. But we had geochem that showed there was gold there. 250 ppb gold sample. Al and I went up. We walked up the hill, and there was a knob of quartz sticking out. It's now known as the Dome Show. And we didn't see gold on that rock that day, but Al took a sample and panned it, and in that sample there was lots of gold, and there was actually gold in the quartz pieces that were in that.
Wow. Peter, what does it feel like when you make that discovery? You've been around a while, and you've probably got, you're subdued now because you've seen so much happen, but talk to me about what it feels like in that moment when you know that you're possibly standing on something that could be a bit of a game changer.
Well, given what we found at the time, it's interesting how that goes, because I'm a geologist, so my inclination and what I did that day was to take what we call a chip sample around the edge of that area. Right? I can show you a picture of this. I took a picture of Al standing on top of it where he took the sample from, and you could see this moss-covered outcrop about 3 meters long, 6 sticking up out of the ground with some trees on it and everything. I mean, it no different than anything you see, but it was white quartz. Right? And I took a sample out of it and I sent it away for analysis. It came back 250 parts per billion, which shows us gold there, but it's nothing exciting. I mean, you can't mine 250 parts, 0.25 of a gram. So Al panned it and found gold in it, as I say, in the pan, found gold in the quartz. So obviously that made a difference. We then we tried to get it optioned. So we optioned it in 1999. Newfoundland, or the predecessor, Palisade, actually optioned that from us in 2016, but they were about the 7th company in on that property. So we dealt with a bunch of different groups. United Carina optioned it in 1999, but prior to that, in February of 1999, it was a real year that wasn't much snow, and had been a bit of rain and stuff around. So we said, a bunch of people said, we want to see your showing. So we drove up from St. John's, and we had a representative from Altius Minerals, who are well known in this island, Roland Butler. And when we got to the showing, we cleaned it off as best we can, dug it off and everything, but we didn't hose it off or anything like that. But it had washed off really well. So we got there and we were showing the guys, there's gold. We hadn't actually at that point seen much gold except the stuff that we had in the samples. And anyway, so we're showing people that, and Roland Butler from Altius, and I still remember this, he said, how come you guys aren't talking about the gold, fingernail-sized pieces of gold along the face of that outcrop? And we all rushed over and looked at it, and there it was. And we said, Roland, we hadn't seen it, because it got washed off between when we were here last and now.
Wow.
And so that got it going, and that really inspired, we did an option pretty quickly. We had a company called United Carina. They actually drilled a hole on the Lotto zone. We found a bunch of these zones, now the ones that Newfoundland are now working on. Lotto particular, they've got Lotto now, they got a pile more. But we had 7 or 8 gold zones on the thing, because we did a grid with United Carina and soil samples, and then we trenched the soil sampling. Pretty well what people are still doing today. It hasn't really changed that much. And we found new showings. So we had a bunch of them. We had the Keats, the Baseline, the Cokes, the Power Line, the Little, and all of these ones, named for various reasons. And the interesting thing about those areas, we were getting on both sides of the Appleton Fault Zone, but better results on the east side, and that's still the date, but Newfoundland is finding it on the west side also. And it went on from there, but the Lotto zone, there was one intersection, a drill hole, 45 grams over 1.5 meters. And United Carina couldn't raise money the next year, so they dropped. We had another company called Candente Resources. They worked on it for 2 or 3 years. In fact, they worked that whole belt quite a bit. And then they left and went to Peru in the middle of a program. They just said, no, we're not going to do it anymore. And then we had a bunch of other companies, Rubicon and their successor, Paragon. And it's gone like that. Even Sprott Gold. Eric Sprott had a company called Sprott Gold. They actually re-optioned it from Paragon at one point. And the last drilling done prior to Newfoundland's drilling was done by Sprott Gold and Paragon. So,
wow.
Yeah.
So, Peter, what do you think, in your opinion, what do you think we're sitting on here? What is this going to mean for Newfoundland and Labrador?
Well, I think the interesting thing about this, and the analog with the Fosterville mine in Australia, which is being made a lot, I think the difference is, and Jeff Swinoga and all these guys make the same point, is that in Fosterville, these high-grade zones are being found 800 meters down, all right? So it was a lower-grade mine, which was still making money, but they're finding these real high-grade zones 800 meters down. Well, we're finding them at surface. Now, does that mean they don't continue? Well, as we know, as we drill, we're still hitting these things, but we don't know how far it's going to go. The biggest problem with these type of deposits is actually outlining the resources in, because they're such high grade, you have to cut your assays. And when you cut your assays, you cut the number of ounces that you have. So you take something, if it was 120 grams, which would be 4 ounces, to do it in a resource, you would have to say that's 1 ounce.
Yeah.
And they, a lot of times, carry the thing. So you might have that and a bunch of lower grade values. So instead of having, say, 18 grams over 10 meters, you might go down to 6 grams over 10 meters.
Right. Yeah.
Well, 5 grams over 10 meters, which is still interesting, but it's nowhere near as the same. So, and it really affects the number of ounces you would report, which would be upsetting to anybody that heard it, because they say, oh, there has to be more gold there, and there would be, but you can't count on it because it's a high-grade intersection.
Right.
So it's that difficulty that they have, whereas in a more consistent type of thing, every one of these veins has to be almost treated separately.
Right.
And it has to be drilled at close enough spacing that you can say, this is the average grade of that vein across it. The interesting thing that I know I've heard of recently is in Kirkland Lake, in the Abitibi, Kirkland Lake, Timmins area, 1/4 of the gold, the drill holes that are drilled are economic.
Okay.
But all of the quartz that is drilled in all of those 4 holes goes to the mill.
Okay.
And what it says is, they don't worry about the grade.
Right.
Because the quartz carries the gold. Just because you don't hit it in an economic quantity, you might go a greater gram instead of 10 grams.
Right.
It still means the gold is there, and you might have missed it by this much.
Okay.
So that area that's surrounding that area is just as prospective as the one where we had the high grade.
Right.
So,
Peter, a lot of interest right now, prospectors coming online, people staking claims and stuff like that. Have you seen this type of activity before?
in a prospecting sense, it's interesting because the last big rush we've had 2 reasonably big rushes. We had the uranium rush in Labrador. We had Voisey's Bay rush, which was the big one, of course. That petered out after a year, mainly because people couldn't raise money anymore. They didn't, unless they could show some values and stuff. Right? The uranium rush lasted for 2 or 3 years. We had a bit of a rush on rare earths too. This is by far the biggest on the island, because those were mostly Labrador based, right? And excuse me, it's the prospectors, the groups that were in it took advantage of it and staked everything they knew, and it really worked well, especially in this area, this part of central Newfoundland, really from here to Grand Falls, that sort of area, a little bit east, a little bit west of there, but it didn't last, and it's typical in these rushes. 2 or 3 years, people come in, they option properties, and I've talked to a few prospectors that have just got properties back the last little while because companies can't raise money. The last few years, it's really dropped off. So the gloss goes off of the discoveries because the main ones are still finding things, but nobody else is finding them or doesn't have the money to do the drilling that's required.
Yeah.
So, and I think that's with Labrador Gold. It's interesting on that being, having the deal now with Newfoundland Gold.
Right.
So,
Calibur into the conversation now. Thoughts on that?
well, yeah, Calibur is a great example of perseverance. I've got pictures of 1983 of Tim Froud, the CEO of Sokoman, taking the first sample, finding the first sample there, following up a soil result that BP Resources had.
Right.
1983.
Wow.
And so hopefully 2025, the boys will be in production. And that's how long it takes sometimes, right?
Is that
and
right?
that went through a bunch of iterations with different companies. Richmont was involved in that for a while. It was a small company that went to Ontario, was from Quebec originally. And now there's been other junior companies involved in it. Rambler had a part of the NSR in it at one point. And it's just, there's so many things that go on to have it make it. I've heard people, and to me, partly is the problem we have in Newfoundland and down east in general, is the crowd on the mainland don't necessarily believe.
Right.
We had a hard sell on Voisey's Bay originally until they saw the core.
Right. Yeah.
They just didn't believe it, and I deal with a lot of people in the up along, because I'm still involved with the PDAC, Prospectors and Developers, and I do find it difficult, and it's good, and it's even worse when you go out west sometimes.
Is that right?
Yeah, but we've had success at the Cordilleran Roundup, which is in January every year, in getting people interested and getting companies interested, and I think that's starting to change a bit.
Yeah.
But I can tell you, I know people in Ontario don't believe that Newfound Gold's real.
Right.
Which is stupid.
Yeah.
Right? But
it's fascinating the way you describe the industry and how long it takes sometimes to get from 1983 to where we are now here with Calibur.
Yeah.
What would you say to the average Newfoundlander about this sector? Because given everything that we just talked about, this is a confusing, complex little world we live in, or you live in here. What would you say to the average Newfoundlander about gold in Newfoundland?
Well, I just think we're scratching the surface. I think this is a good example of this. Like I said, we used to drive across this and didn't know it was there. I mean, it's hard to believe that much gold was sitting there and nobody knowing about it. I lived in Gander from 1969 to 82. And I never envisioned this, a Minex. I just said Gander is an airport town. It's a service center for this part of Newfoundland. Minerals, no. And here we are, second year for Minex, right?
Yeah.
So I think there's other areas of the province. I think the Bayburt Peninsula has huge potential. It's still untapped. Sokeman's working on a great project out in the Fleur-de-Lis belt, they call it. Interesting area there. I think the Burin Peninsula, what we call the Avalon zone of the island, I think that's got great untapped potential, not only for gold. As gold, the way these things work, we have these high sulfidation, low sulfidation systems, we call them epithermal systems. We have some examples of those in central Newfoundland, but in eastern Newfoundland, in what we call the Avalon Belt, which is the equivalent of Morocco, North Africa.
Yeah.
That's where the geology goes. That's where it came from. Okay. Those type of systems, you have these high sulfidation, low sulfidation epithermal systems, and we're finding those down there. But more recently, we're finding them. Again, they weren't respected. But below that, if you go to any of those places they exist, below them are porphyry systems. Now, everybody said there's no porphyries left in the Appalachians. They're eroded off. But what happens is the only place you find these epithermal systems is above and marginal to porphyries. So if we start finding the epithermal systems, the porphyry should be there. Now, are they down 100 meters, 200 meters, 300 meters? I don't think they have to be down very far. And porphyry systems are still the biggest producers of copper and gold and associated silver in the world.
Wow.
That's where you get it all. It's lower grade. The copper can be reasonably high grade too. It can be 2%, 3%. But a lot of them are 0.5%, 1% type thing, but they're such huge deposits. They usually have gold and silver with them. So I think those type of things down the road, I mean, the average Newfoundlander doesn't even know this exists.
Yeah.
That Newfound gold and Labrador gold and exploits and right on down to CanStar on the bottom and other companies that are right out in Twillingate. I mean, that's the belt. The belt is that long. And when people talk about similarities to Abitibi, that's correct. You know, structurally wise, the geology isn't the same, but the structure's the same.
Peter, an amazing conversation. The way you describe it, your eyes light up. I mean, you're in your sweet spot here. But what I really loved about it, you said, I never would have envisioned a Minex in this town. And here we are.
Exactly.
Second year in a row. And I watch you over in the corner, excited and passionate about showing high school kids what this is all about. And that's really what it's all about.
It is.
Engaging them, right?
Yeah. And getting people to see the value, see the potential, and maybe get involved in it. And as I said, you know, in the mineral industry, you can go from cleaning the rooms to the top guy in that company. That's what's available to you.
Yeah.
Anywhere in between. You can be the geologist, you can be a prospector, you can be a field technician, you can be an environmental technician. There's all of these opportunities there once the industry continues to develop. And this is not just here, it's Bayvert area and out west, and it's amazing.
Peter, an absolute pleasure to be in conversation with you. Please accept this ball cap on behalf of our sponsor,
Thank you very
Calibur,
much.
and
I appreciate that.
I really appreciate your leadership in this area in Newfoundland and Labrador.
Thank you very much.